Hi everyone, DrBiology here, and this is a short video about genetic inheritance, or how do genes produce characteristics. So let's have a think. So there are several keywords we need to think about first of all. So a gene, you would have already known that a gene controls different characteristics. Some characteristics are controlled by a single gene, so things like eye colour. However, most are controlled by several genes. And then you have alleles. Now alleles, they are two versions of every gene. So an allele can be either dominant, which we express as a capital letter, or it can be recessive, which is a small letter. So in this case, capital B is a dominant allele and a lowercase b is recessive. So if an organism has two alleles that are the same, then they're said to be homozygous. Whereas if an organism has two alleles that are different, then it's heterozygous. So in this case, you can see heterozygous pointing to the big B, little b, and homozygous to the little b, and the big B. And you'll notice dominant is capital letter, recessive is lowercase. Now, your genotype is the combination of alleles you have, and your phenotype are the characteristics that you have. Okay, so just a quick recap of some of those words, okay? Particularly though, a genotype describes the alleles present or a genetic makeup of an individual, and phenotype describes the physical appearance of an individual. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some examples of what happens when alleles cross with each other and what kind of characteristics you would get. Okay, so let's have a look at some examples of what we call Punnett square genetic diagrams. So let's imagine that we have the dominant allele, so big B in this case, will give you brown eyes, whereas the recessive allele will give you blue eyes. Now, in terms of the alleles, to have brown eyes, then either the person will be big B, little b, or big B, big B. To have blue eyes, they would have to have both recessive alleles. Okay. So let's have a look at two parents first of all. Okay, so I'm going to tell you that the parents both have brown eyes. Okay, so let's have a look at the first of all, so the male is going to have the following. Okay, so big B, and then I'm going to draw Punnett square like that, very badly, and the female up here is going to be big B, little b. So what we need to do is work out what the genotypes are. So these are the genotypes, okay, and then we need to work out, well, what proportion or of offspring will have blue eyes or brown eyes. So this is the way I do it. So male, so big B, female, big B, male, big B, female, little b, male, big B, female, big B, and then male, big B, female, little b. So in this case you can see that basically all of them will have brown eyes. Okay, and you can see actually that half of them will be homozygous and others will be heterozygous. Okay, so let's go on to another example. So I'll just wipe that out. So let's imagine we have a different set of parents. Okay, so in this case, actually the father has blue eyes and the mother has brown eyes. Okay, so again, we'll draw the Punnett square. So male, I'm going to make little b because they've got blue eyes, and mother is heterozygous for brown. Okay, so again, I always go with the dominant allele first. Okay, so you can see I'm just working out which one's which, and little b, little b. So in this case, the offspring, there's a 50% chance they will have brown or blue eyes. So 50% brown and 50% blue. So just to recap that, okay, so here are the blue eyes, so they're the blue, and then brown. Do I have a brown? Oh goodness me, I do. There you go. There we go. Brown eyes. So there we have a Punnett square diagram. Oops. Star-Lord. Star-Lord, this is really bad for you. So we can actually say there's a 1-to-1 ratio. So if you want to put it into ratios, okay, that would be a 1-to-1. Okay, so let's pay homage to Mendel. Okay, so he did a lot of work with pea plants, and in his pea plants he used to look at different characteristics. One of the characteristics he looked at was whether the peas can be either round, so round, or wrinkly. Okay, so that's a wrinkly pea. Okay, and he basically the gene that causes the wrinkly pea is recessive. So let's use a little r to represent that. Okay, so a wrinkly one is going to be 2 alleles there, little r, and round peas are either going to be homozygous dominant or they're going to be heterozygous dominant. Okay, so let's cross a round pea. So we've got a round pea with a wrinkly pea. Okay, so we're going to use this. Okay, now again I'm going to use Punnett squares. I just find Punnett squares so much easier than using other methods. One of the other methods is using arrows, which I really find confusing myself. Okay, so let's do the cross. So big R, little r, big R, little r, big R, little r, and big R, little r. Okay, so this shows a genetic cross, and it shows all these are the possible alleles of the offspring. And as you can see, you're predicting and explaining what will happen. And in this case, you can see that all would be round, so all would be round peas. Okay, so let's have a look at a different one, so different ratios, so that basically they will all be round. So let's imagine, okay, we take those offspring. Okay, so we're going to take both round peas, so we're going to take both the round peas, so both heterozygous dominant, okay, and we're going to cross them again in a Punnett square. Okay, so here we go. So big R, little r, big R, little r. So this case you've got a homozygous dominant, heterozygous dominant, heterozygous dominant, and you've got homozygous recessive. Okay, so in this case you can see that the cross gives you what we call a 3-to-1 ratio. So you got 1 round, 2, 3. So that is a 3-to-1 ratio. Okay, so you're producing well, in terms of round peas, a 3-to-1 ratio of plants producing round peas to plants producing wrinkly peas. So this means there is 1 in 4, or you could say 25%, for example, chance of any new plant being a wrinkly pea. I'll put my teeth back in. Being a wrinkly pea. Okay. So there we go. So these are what we call a probability. These are probabilities. So that is not necessarily what will happen, but these are the chances of something happening. So probabilities is basically, they don't say definitely what will happen. Okay. So let's cross now. Let's cross a round pea with a wrinkly pea. Okay. So let's have a look at that one. Okay, so I'm going to go round pea with a wrinkly pea. So again, Punnett square. And if we cross them, you can now see they're all homozygous dominant. Okay, so all the offspring are heterozygous round, so they're round peas and they're heterozygous. So there's 100%. So for GCSE biology only, you'll need to know about the works of Gregor Mendel. So our understanding of inheritance began with the work of Gregor Mendel and has developed over time. So he was an Austrian monk, and before that he actually trained in mathematics and natural sciences before joining the monastery. He had a garden plot in the monastery, and he grew many different species of plants, including peas. And he noticed that characteristics were passed on from one generation to the next. And he noticed that certain things were being inherited, and he called these hereditary units. He didn't realize at the time that these were related to the genes of the plant, the genes and alleles, as that had not been discovered yet. So these results were published in 1866, but not many scientists took note of what he had done because of where he had published his work, and also he was well advanced in terms of his thinking of hereditary units at the time. So let's have a look at some of the work of Gregor Mendel. So here we have a cross between a tall and a short plant. So in this first cross, we're going to look at homozygous dominant and recessive alleles. So the tall is capital T, and the short is lowercase t, lowercase t. And as you can see in the Punnett square diagram, all the offspring are going to be tall. Now, if you then cross the two tall plants, so what we call the heterozygous dominant plants, you'll notice then that we get 3 tall and 1 short. So this is known as a 3-to-1 ratio, and this is something that you would find in lots of different species, not just plants but also animals. Okay, and it's a law of genetics basically, and it shows the kind of the inheritance of characteristics. So from all his experiments on the pea plants, looking at different things such as height, colour, shape of peas, he came to the following conclusions, and you need to learn these for your exam. So characteristics in plants are determined by hereditary units. These are passed on to offspring unchanged from both parents, 1 unit from each parent, and units can be dominant or recessive. So if an individual has both types of units, then the dominant characteristic will be expressed. We now find, these days, we now know that hereditary units are genes. So at the time that Gregor Mendel did his work, DNA and chromosomes had not been discovered. So his findings really were way ahead of his time, and it really set the foundations in terms of inheritance at an early stage. So when DNA and genetics was starting to be discovered around the turn of the 20th century, people started to take note of his work, and it wasn't until after his death that the significance of what he had done became apparent. Okay, so we've reached the question checkpoint. What I would like you to do, please, is to have a look at these questions. So you need to pause the video, read them, and then I'd like you to answer them, and then I'm going to go through them. So 3, 2, 1, pause now. Right, so this question, it says, in humans, hair colour is an inherited characteristic. Red hair is caused by a recessive allele. So when does a recessive allele control the development of a characteristic? We're looking at the answers. The correct answer would be when the dominant allele is not present. So you would need 2 recessive alleles for red hair to occur. Figure 1 shows the inheritance of hair colour in one family, and you can see a pedigree chart here, and you can see male and female, and you can see that they have brown hair, and then one of the offspring, number 3, has red hair. So it tells you brown hair is caused by a dominant allele, red hair is caused by a recessive allele, and they show you the corresponding letters. So what combination of alleles does person 1 have? Well, if they're producing offspring with both red hair and brown hair, then the person 1 would be heterozygous dominant, which is capital B, lowercase b. Okay, so I'd like you again to pause, have a look, and answer this question. So 3, 2, 1, pause. It then says person 3 married a woman with brown hair. So figure 2 shows how hair colour should be inherited by their children, and it tells you to complete figure 2 to show the combination of alleles that the children would inherit. One has been done for you. So you need to fill in the corresponding Punnett square. So the answers you would get are these. Okay, so you're showing you're showing basically the alleles. So you're showing that 50% brown hair and 50% have red hair. And then it says, what is the probability that one of the children would have red hair? Well, you can see that it's a 50% chance, so it's 1 in 2. So question 2, what I'd like you to do again is to pause, read and answer. So in 3, 2, 1. So question 2, humans have 2 different sex chromosomes, X and Y, and they show figure 2 shows the inheritance of sex in humans, and it says circle a part of figure 2 that shows an egg cell. We can have either that answer, the X, or the other X from the mother. It says give the genotype of male offspring, so the genotype of the different sex chromosomes, so it would be X and Y. And then a man and a woman have 2 sons. The woman is pregnant with a 3rd child. What's the chance that this child will also be a boy? Well, that will be 50%. So regardless of how many children you've had, every time you have a child, it's going to be 50%. Question 3. Okay, so this is GCSE biology only. So it gives you some information about Gregor Mendel, and the diagram shows the results Mendel obtained in one investigation with the purple flowered and white flowered pea plants. So I'd like you to have a really good look at this, please, and pause it and answer. So 3, 2, 1. So first question, it says calculate the ratio of purple flowered plants to white flowered plants in the F2 generation. Now, you already know from what I've been saying that it's a 3-to-1 ratio. However, in the exam they actually want you to calculate it. So the key word is calculate. So the answer is 3.15 to 1. So you take 705 and divide by 224. You can have 3.147 to 1, but it's best to round it up. If you were to put 3.14 to 1, it would be incorrect. So it's important you get that correctly shown in terms of the figures. Then it says there was a total of 929 plants in the F2 generation, so Mendel thought that the production of a large number of offspring plants improved the investigation. Explain why. Well, there are many different answers here, so you can have any two from the following. So first of all, fertilization is random, or you could say it's a chance combinations of alleles and genes. You're more likely to get theoretical ratios or a correct pattern or valid results if you use a large number of experimental results. And also, if you have a large sample, anomalies have a limited effect and they can actually be identified in the data. So that's more about working scientifically, that question. Second part of the question, so again, I'd like you to pause it, read it and answer it. So pause in 3, 2, 1. So it says in B, it says some of the plants in the diagram are homozygous for flower colour and some are heterozygous. And it says complete the table to show whether each of the plants is homozygous or heterozygous. So purple flowered plant in the P generation. Okay, so you can see that it produces all offspring are purple. Okay, so that's homozygous. White flowered plants in the P generation, again that is homozygous, so it's homozygous recessive. And then purple flowered plants in the F1 generation, so let's have a look in the F1. Well, they're a mixture of the two, so it must be heterozygous. It then says draw a genetic diagram, move myself over there, to show how self-pollination of the F1 purple flowered plants produced mainly purple flower offspring in the F2. So if they're heterozygous, using the following symbols, your Punnett square would look like this. So you can see that would tell you will give you 1 mark for the parents, 1 mark for showing Punnett squares, and the third mark is for stipulating which are purple and which are white. So in this case, homozygous dominant and the dominant heterozygous are purple, whereas the homozygous recessive is white. And then it says when he published his work, other scientists at the time did not realize how important it was. Suggest 2 reasons, so any of those reasons. So what I would do is probably pause and have a read of those reasons, but that's a good set of reasons for you to learn. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the question checkpoint. Okay, so there we have some examples of Punnett square diagrams to look at genetic inheritance. So I hope you found that useful. Please do subscribe to DrBiology, as I'm covering a lot more on this subject. See you soon.